The Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience. Here we are, friends. 2020 Masters DraftKings picks and preview. If you want to play in the best tournament on DraftKings, here's what you do. You smash the like button for the video. In the comment section, you tell me who's going to win this year's Masters. And then in the description of this video, you will find a link to the Pat Mayo Experience Listeners League. $15 to play, 3 max entry, no rake. There are 5,000 spots. It's already like 45% filled. So I'd recommend you go reserve your spot right now if you want to get in that. Play in the Millionaire Maker too. I might even have some giveaways coming around. So the more you can retweet the show, share it around, like it, comment, smash likes, tune into the other shows, we'll be all good to go. My betting preview will be out Monday afternoon with Jeff Feinberg. Wednesday, noon Eastern on Mayo Media Network YouTube channel will be the live chat. You have any questions about the Masters, about your bets, about your lineups, or just in general, tune in. I will also be releasing my final picks on that day too. So please subscribe to Mayo Media Network, smash all the likes on the videos, and we are good to go. Also, rate and review the Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast. This time of year really goes a long way. If you've never reviewed the show or rated the show on Apple Podcasts, please go do that right now. It takes like 3 seconds, and I would greatly appreciate it. Also, things I would greatly appreciate, following the contributors to this show. First up, from Awesemo.com as at JazzRazDFS on the Twitter machines, it's Ben Rasa. What is happening?
What's up, man? Yeah, we made it. It's been quite a year. Thought this would be in April, but you know what? We'll take it in November. I'm very, very excited to talk some Masters.
From the Rick Run Good YouTube channel, at Rick Run Good on Twitter from CBS Sports, and a contributor to Golf Digest, it is Rick Gehman. My man, what is happening?
Pat, it's here. It's time. Now we get back-to-back Masters. Should we just record this and run the same thing back in April, or are we doing it all again in April?
I need the extra clicks and the extra content, so I'm assuming we're just going to run it all back again.
All right, that's good.
I want to remind everyone out there, if you are looking for the best tools on the planet for your DraftKings lineup, for your bets, or if you just enjoy researching golf, get a membership to fantasynational.com right now, okay? You go to fantasynational.com/Mayo, you get yourself the discount which you need. Everyone who's good uses Fantasy National. You want to be good? You use Fantasy National too, okay? Let's talk Masters. Augusta, it's in November. First up, Ben. How can I word this properly? What are you doing with the weather? Are we treating this like it's completely different? It's completely the same. Right now, it looks like it's going to be like around 60 degrees and kind of wet throughout the course of the week.
So yeah, we were talking out just a little before the show about this. I don't really remember any Masters that kind of fit that criteria. We've seen some difficult ones, certainly like the Willett comes to mind, but I don't know exactly what we do with this. I'm not going to overhaul it. You know, obviously, we've seen this course a million times. I do think it could be some nasty conditions if you go out early and the split tees and whatnot, but I'm going to play it pretty straight up and maybe just fine tweak some things at the end.
Rick, the last 2 times that we've seen it play difficult, shorter hitters ended up winning. The Willett year with that ton of wind, it was very difficult in 2016. Zach Johnson won at 1 over par in 2009 when he didn't go at any of the par 5s and 2. I don't think that we're going to see a repeat of that ever again just because the guys hit the ball so far now. But do you think it leans more to that type of year or just like your average -10 type Masters?
Yeah, I think it'll be your average -10 types Masters. I think they really dodged a bullet on the fact that this wasn't or doesn't look like it's going to be cold and wet. Warm and wet, certainly much better. The mornings will be a bit more brisk than these guys are used to on the PGA Tour. The wet conditions presumably helping some of the bombers out and some of the guys who we'll talk about. We'll save that for maybe the top of the 10K range. But yeah, I think that they really dodged a bullet here. The one thing that we do get at Augusta National sometimes in November is you get a northerly wind, which, some of the anecdotes from some of the players who have played Augusta National in November is it plays a lot longer on holes like 1 in 18, right? I mean, Tiger famously said he hit driver 3-wood into number 1 and driver 3-wood into number 18 the one time he played it in November. So we'll see how that shakes out. Probably plays a little bit longer. the wet conditions, I think, are certainly going to benefit the Bombers.
If you're going to adjust your stat modeling at all, which you can do on Fantasy National, I would set my parameters to fit more longer irons than I normally would. I think that's about the only adjustments I'm going to make, because I weight driving distance pretty heavily to begin with, as we've seen that strokes gained off the tee at Augusta National, along with course history. Like, course history is something that we kind of always scoff at. I mean, you can point to one guy like, oh, look at his great course history. Of course he played well. But you always forget the guy that shot like 20 over, although he had made the cut every single year at that course. But Augusta National is the one place where it really does seem to matter. Like, there's a reason that Fred Couples continues to make cuts at like 900 years old.
Yeah, it's just a course, I think more than any, you benefit from playing it in these conditions. You see it, and guys who are veterans, they know where to hit it. They know where to leave it. It's I don't have to call it a second shot course, but there's just a lot of navigation through it. So there's something to that. The one other side to that, though, it has, I don't want to call it a WGC, but this is not a normal cut. So you are going to see course history where a lot of guys make the cut every year at the Masters, because to not, you really need to struggle when it's 10 shots of the lead, top 50, but there's only 90 something guys in the field.
Yeah, 94 players in the field this year. There was 95. Joaquin Niemann had to withdraw late last week with a positive test for COVID-19. That sucks for him, because missing the Masters is one thing. He'll be in the Masters next time around, obviously, but he won the Greenbrier, the first event of the 2019 swing season, which made him the first actual qualifier for the Masters that didn't have an automatic invite coming through. So he waited 18 months to play in his first Masters as a professional, the long wait, and now he has to wait another 6 months or so. No Daniel Berger in the field, despite being a top 20 player in the world. No Victor Hovland in the field, despite being a top 25 player in the world rankings, because this field locked at the end of March, which really kind of throws a wrench into some guys that would have got a lot of DraftKings buzz, Rick, going through, because they're riding hot form. You've seen them surge in the rankings. That was years ago, basically, at this point. It literally feels like the Masters haven't been played in a decade. So we get to it now that it's kind of difficult to figure out, because like even all of the top end players, we've seen like spatterings of them playing, but it's not like these guys are consistently on tour going out every single week since the US Open.
Yeah, for sure. It's the scheduling changes for this year have been awkward for everybody. Some guys have taken extra precautions before Augusta National to try to avoid the positive COVID test. We interviewed Ricky Fowler a couple of days ago. He mentioned that he wants to play the week before. He wants to play Houston, but with the fact that it was a new course and he didn't want to take any unnecessary risk, basically leaving his house to avoid any potential exposure to COVID-19 and something that happened to a positive test like it happened to Joaquin Niemann. Yeah, the schedule is completely different. So guys are trying to find their form for Augusta National at their home course or on their simulator or without many rounds under their belt this season. And you remember, Pat, this goes back to the restart where it was a sprint. It was an absolute sprint to the playoffs. There were guys who played many more weeks in a row than they would have liked. Now they're taking the time off and they're trying to rev it back up for the biggest event of the year. It's just awkward. It's different for everyone in a year of, an event with so much tradition. This is the most untraditional year.
94 players in the field. The top 50 in ties will make the cut, as will any player within 10 strokes of the lead. So as Ben pointed out, that making the cut at Augusta National is a lot easier than you would presumably think. I believe last year was almost 70% of the players ended up making the cut. Always right for to make the cut parlay bets, which I will release on Wednesday. Actually won it last year, which was fantastic news after missing it by one guy the previous 2 years. Thanks, Jason Duffner, for bogeying the par 5 2 years ago, and Sergio for taking a 13 on hole number 15 3 years ago. That's always a good time. But this year, I'm feeling good about to make the cut parlays. Ben, we got Emiliano Grillo shot tracker rejigging. Like it said, he ended up bogeying the hole. Then it got updated to a bird or to a par. All of a sudden, he makes the cut. You win the parlay. But can we just give a special shout out to the Masters app and how good it is?
Oh, it's amazing. It is shot tracker on steroids. It's everything that it should be every week. They have continuously been cutting edge, so I cannot wait for that. It's as good as it gets coverage-wise.
All right, let's do this. Let's jump into the pricing. At the very top, in the $10,000 level on DraftKings for the 2020 Masters, we have the king of girth himself. Big-bodied Bryson, the most expensive player, $11,200 $1,200. He's followed by Justin Thomas at 10-7, Rahm at 10-5, Rory at 10-2, and Dustin Johnson at $10,000. Rick, when you're building your teams, as Ben pointed out, you can almost treat this a little bit like a WGC, where there's going to be like 10 guys at the very bottom that you're just not going to play. There's no reason to play any of the old guys. They're not going to win. You want to at least have some win equity in all 6 of your lineup spots. If you're going to compete in the Millie Maker, in a giant contest, you're going to have the winner. You're probably going to need second place, and you're going to need that sneaky guy at a lower price who ends up finishing inside the top 15 or makes a hole in 1 on 16 on Sunday to get those bonus points. That's how this usually works when you look at the teams. Do you think that it's logical to put 2 guys in the $10,000 area into your lineup?
I do, and I think it's a lot easier, certainly in major championships and Millie Maker type situations to do it because the pricing's a little bit softer. You're looking at, Bryson 11,200 and he's 8-1 to win the tournament. If this was, a regular tour stop, he might be pushing closer to $12,000. I mean, it's just with the depth of field, how soft the pricing tends to be. You can usually pile in 2 of these guys and still get 6 golfers who are eating up enough of the win equity to keep you live in a lot of these big GPPs. So I think so. Obviously, very early, we'll start to build lineups here in the next couple of days and start to figure out the permutations and the combinations of everything. But I certainly think that is the way to play it and just go grab 2 big boys and see what happens.
Ben, is Bryson going to suffer from Patrick Reed syndrome, Ian Poulter syndrome, where enough people just don't like him that they're not going to play him? Because I'm just looking at this and play Bryson. That's my advice.
So it's interesting. He certainly has that factor for him, but I think he also has, I don't know what we can coin it or name it, but he has the factor that for months since he started this experiment, it was for Augusta. And everybody has now started to see, wow, maybe this is working. I think that if the results were bad, I think people would be interested in him because he's been gearing up for this. But they haven't been bad. He won the US Open. And I think just the way he's doing it, everybody's been waiting and penciled this in. So I think Bryson's going to be really popular because even the casuals, all they know about Bryson is, oh, this is the guy who's about to tear Augusta apart.
I don't know about that in particular, only because he's so expensive, and you can get someone like Dustin Johnson, who is the best player in the world right now, for what? $1,200 cheaper. I think that's just where you can play Rahm and Dustin or Justin Thomas or even Rory for that matter. Or you can build one of these balanced lineups where it's like Dustin Johnson, Patrick Cantlay, Tony Finau, and you don't have to go diving into like the very low 7,000, high 6,000. You might get one guy from down there, but you can still attack like the upper 7s and lower 8s too. Using Bryson, because he's so expensive, it takes a lot of different builds out of play, and I think that may keep ownership off of him. I'm not sure, because I'm going to be using him everywhere, but I don't think he's going to be I don't think he's going to be the most popular guy, put it that way.
See, I do personally. I think he'll be the most popular play, and I get it. I do. For me, I'm more inclined to go with
Rory.
What Rick mentioned. Well, yeah, Rory, but more Rahm too. I think that Rahm sets up well if it is a little colder and wet. He can just lean on the driving. He's been unbelievable too. So I'll take the savings to those guys if I'm getting ownership discount as well.
Yeah, Rick, what are you doing here? Because I'm trying out, I told you guys before we came on the air that I have 3 futures bets on the Masters. I have Bryson at 40-1, I have Justin Thomas at 20-1, and Justin Rose at 75-1, who's probably not going to win. It was a terrible bet at the time. I think he's even longer odds at this point. But can I make lineups with Bryson and Justin Thomas and work it out from there?
If you can, I'd love it. We'd have to see what the rest of that lineup looks like. But I mean, listen, the wetter, the better for Bryson. I think it's very clear he's going to carry it further than basically everybody. So he's going to have the advantage there. And then also remember this, as Bryson is going through this transformation, he's playing a lot of new events. He's hitting shots he's not used to hitting. He's hitting a lot of these half wedge, these 3/4 wedge shots into greens. That can be troublesome at firm, fast golf courses because think about it. If you have a full wedge shot into a green, you can get a lot more spin on it. You can control it. You can kind of land it where you want. If you're not able to get that spin on it on firm, fast greens, it can be troublesome. If those greens are wet, if they are receptive, if it's a little bit more friendly towards those shots, Bryson could absolutely tear this thing apart. We're seeing some of the lines that he might take on like 13 and what he might be able to do to number 2. I mean, there's only so much defense to Augusta National. It's a pretty straightforward course. If he's going to do what he's been telling us that he's going to do, I think everybody else is in big trouble.
If I put in Justin Thomas and Bryson as my first 2 players in my lineup, I have $7,000 per player left over. I think I can make that work. When we get to the 6K level, maybe we can figure that out. If you're looking for ownership projections, fantasynational.com/Mayo to get your discount. We'll be updating live to the moment as the week goes along. You're probably going to want to look at them on Wednesday evening once most people have built their lineups, use the lineup generator, start all of their guys, and you can see who the most popular picks are going to be. But looking at it right now, and obviously this is very early, it does appear, Ben, like the top 3 in ownership are Finau, Dustin Johnson, and Jon Rahm.
It's interesting again, and that speaks to what you were talking about. Maybe the appeal of that balanced lineup, where you could theoretically have all 3 of those guys in some builds, will overtake what Bryson, to me, who's the most polarizing on the entire slate. So it's something to keep an eye on. I mean, Justin Thomas and Rory, to me, somehow are, quote, I don't want to say they're sneaky, but I think they may be the lowest owned of this, if we want to call them the big 5. And I mean, you're not going to need a lot to talk me into them long term. I was higher on them than the other 3.
What do we do with Rory here? Because he has been by far the worst of these 4 guys since the tour restarted back in June. Like, has there been an actual event where Rory has had a chance to win since the restart?
I mean, he had his chances to win. I would say no, honestly. Like at Travelers and a couple others, he was lurking, but did he ever make that move where it was like, oh, here Rory's going to win? I would say no. You could look at it both ways. As bad as he's been, hasn't been like, the strokes gain data, he's still going to gain off the tee every time. The putter actually has come around lately. It's been really the irons that have been hit or miss. So yes, it's concerning. He's not playing nearly as good as these other guys, but I mean, it's still Rory in my mind.
Yeah, there's just the one thing with Rory, obviously he's going for the career Grand Slam. If he can get the Masters, he'll own all 4 majors, Rick. But Congressional US Open, when no one could play that course, it was cold, it was wet, and Rory went out and beat the shit out of everyone that week. That just lingers in my mind.
I think that you're both correct. I think that course, Rory flies his ball through the air, right? He's a bomber who does not necessarily use the ground. Like JT rolls it more, right? He doesn't hit as much of a high shot as Rory does. But to Ben's point, it's the iron game. I mean, he's been pedestrian, literally tour average since the tour restart on approach. That's the one thing that's setting him apart. Now, I could argue that Rory's floor is very, very high because he's been a tour average iron player. The stat in the category that is probably more important than any other stat. He's been tour average and he still continues to find himself, top 15, top 20, never really in contention, but he's not really, killing all of your lineup. So I could argue Rory's got one of the highest floors. If he can flip the switch, which I'm not as optimistic about in that category, because it's been now 15 measured starts, something like that since the restart for Rory. He's going to be very dangerous. I'm less optimistic about that because it's not about conditions. It's more about the shape of his game.
So do you think that high ball flight hitters actually do have a huge advantage in the wet conditions at the Masters this year?
I think that they do in general, right? This is always the argument when you get wet conditions. You hear bombers, but there's 2 different types of bombers. There's guys that carry it 98% of their total distance, and there's guys that carry it 93% of their total distance. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but it ends up being a half a club or a full club for a lot of these guys on the PGA Tour when it comes to their approach shots. Now, there are a couple of situations at Augusta National where, number 2 specifically, number 15, it would almost be advantageous to be like back a little bit on top of the hill on a flat lie than trying to fly it over everything, get it down. Now you're on a downhill lie where the ball might be below your feet. I mean, there's a couple of holes there that I think not necessarily flying it as far is as critical, but yes, I do think the guys that are hitting it further in the air in wet conditions are going to have a half a club or a club advantage.
If you're looking for the leaders in carry distance off the tee so far, at least during the swing season in 2020, or I guess the 2021 one season on tour. Bryson is number one. His average carry, 345 yards, which is just outrageous. That's 30 yards more than the guy in second place, who is Cameron Smith of all people, who's played well. The last Masters, like I said, it feels like a decade ago, but the 2019 Masters played pretty well. Rory McIlroy, number 3, Cameron Champ, number 4, and then a bunch of guys who just aren't in the Masters. The next closest guy would actually be Matthew Wolff. It does seem, Ben, like if I'm going to use Bryson, although he is a débutant at Augusta, that you just pair Matthew Wolff with Bryson. They always play well at the same tournaments.
Yeah, and there's something to that. Certainly, we've seen the correlation now. I think part of it is going to depend on how hard it plays. And listen, Wolff's performance in the majors has put a major dent into the narrative that he's just going to take apart the 3M and the Rocket Mortgage year after year, and that's all he can do. We know he can do more than that now. But pairing him and Bryson obviously makes sense because their games correlate in a lot of ways. So I will look to do that. I still think really this week more than any, you really want to decide how you want to build up top and go from there. If you're going to do an incremental build, that's one thing. If you are going to double up north of 10K, that is a completely different permutation, and it changes the whole look of your lineups.
If we look back at last year in terms of carry distance off the tee, Rick, Bryson's number 1, not by quite as much, but Ryan Brehm is number 2. I don't think he got the invite to the Masters this year. But in this field, it's Bryson, Wolff, Rory, Dustin, Champ, Tommy Fleetwood, John Rahm, Jason Kokrak, Brooks, Tony Finau, Gary Woodland, Bubba Watson. Like, those are guys that historically play. I mean, Kokrak's never played before, and neither is Wolff, but historically, those are the guys that play well at the Masters.
I think I love all those guys. Yeah, I mean, we'll get down to Jason Kokrak, obviously coming in off of a recent win, sneaky long. You mentioned it. I mean, he's a lot longer than people realize, especially with the way that he carries it. And I think that's going to be a big key this week. Yeah, I mean, a lot of those names, right? Bubba is awesome. Woodland has been a shell of himself, but
he's hurt. You can't use Woodland, right?
No, and he tried to play through it. It was terrible. He's got like a torn labrum in his hip or something like that. He tried to play through it. It was absolutely bad. I have no desire whatsoever to play Gary Woodland, but the rest of those guys, yeah, they seem great. They're playing well. They have a lot of great course history. I mean, even Jason Day was on that list. Guys lurking all over the place. I think there's a list of names that you just rattled off, Pat, that I'd be happy to find in my lineups.
So the rest of the guys on that list inside the top 50 from last year in carrying it off the tee, Jason Day is number 32. Who else do we got here? Justin Thomas was number 37, Hideki 39, Cantlay, Xander, Adam Scott, Paul Casey, Sergio, and Justin Rose. Again, guys who have immaculate course history or former winners at this event. So when we really rattle it down, Ben, it does seem like the name that hasn't been popping up on these lists is like John Rahm, which is weird.
Yeah, and I don't know exactly what's causing that per se. Rahm is, listen, I know, again, this is why, just to go back, I think Bryson is taking a lot of the storylines out of it. Like, John Rahm has been unbelievable. He is just dominating tee to green. Off the tee is automatic. Everything else is good. He can putt. He really has no leaks in his game. So I'm not going to say he's going to go under the radar, because he's not. But at the same time, he doesn't have that big time narrative. He's not going for the career Grand Slam. He's not Bryson. He's just playing really good golf. And I'm going to certainly look to him this week for obvious reasons.
So if we're going to say there's one lock guy from above 10K to put into your lineups, I'm going to go with Bryson. Rick, who are you going to go with?
Man, I think it's still Bryson. Yeah, I'm happy to pay it. It's I don't know if I can get a second guy in there, but I think it's Bryson as well.
Ben?
I mean, I want to say Rory, but I will say Rahm.
Have you ever gone into a Masters or any major where you haven't just loaded up on Rory?
So any major, I can say yes, because there's certain U.S. Opens where I'm just like, okay, I'm not going to do this. But Masters, no, I cannot remember truly going into a Masters not starting with Rory.
9K range. And I think this is where it gets really interesting. When we talk about like pivot plays and where to save yourself on ownership, I do think from like 85 to 10,000, you're going to find some low owned guys, because everyone is gravitating towards the same sort of name. So the first up, Xander Schauffele. Everyone's going to use Xander Schauffele because everyone always uses Xander Schauffele. And it's not like he's bad. So he's a pretty good price at $9,800. Brooks, Cantlay, Morikawa at 95, Hatton at 94, Webb, Reed, Tiger, and Bubba Watson. We'll save Tiger for here in a second, but I don't think that anyone I mean, when I say anyone, I'm talking about like single digit, like 5, 6, 7% owned in the Millionaire Maker. Morikawa and Brooks really seem to me, Rick, like the guys that everyone is avoiding here.
Yeah, that sounds right. Now, what's so interesting about Morikawa is, what we talked about for so long. 24 cuts in a row to start his career, second to only Tiger Woods. He's been a lot more volatile since then. I'd argue that's okay. It's good. We're getting the winning upside with now 3 victories under his belt in his PGA Tour career. We're getting a couple more missed cuts, but I like what I'm seeing from him, which is it seems like he's taking a lot more chances. He's willing to embrace a missed cut as opposed to just grinding, Thursday and Friday to keep the streak going. I actually think the streak ending for him is arguably a good thing. So I like that a lot. And then Brooks Koepka, much less optimistic on. The problem that I have with Brooks is it's going to be week to week, and he's told us that. He has told us sometimes he wakes up, the knee feels good. He's told us that, hey, it hurts when I walk downhill. Like, that seems problematic. I mean, he's banking on a quarter zone shot right now. His weapon, which is his driver, hasn't really been working for him. He's been struggling off the tee. I mean, I think there's so many issues with Brooks Koepka. He's deservedly going to be a single digit ownership guy. Morikawa, much more optimistic about.
What do you make, Ben, of people factoring in the results of Houston? Obviously, we're recording this while the Houston Open is still going on. Guys like Dustin and Brooks are still playing the weekend. Molinari is back. Do you think that there's going to be any leftover, like, oh, these guys played well? Brooks didn't play well in Houston, therefore I can't use him. Like, would you use Houston as a barometer of anything?
I wouldn't know, but I think people will. The narrative, especially with guys that we haven't seen recently, it's just like, oh, right, this is where their game is at based on 4 arbitrary rounds in Houston. So I think that's kind of a leak for people. If for some reason Brooks storms on Sunday and he closes with a huge round at Houston, I do think that would have a direct impact on his Masters ownership.
So where do you think you're going to be going in the $9,000 area? Just by the Pat Mayo logic of sentiment rating. And when I look at the ownership percentages, this kind of bears it out a little bit. Xander, Cantlay, Bubba, I project to be the 3 highest owned.
I don't like this range at all. There's some interesting plays, I guess, from an ownership perspective. I would much rather pay 2 north of these guys and double up. Patrick Reed is where I would go because I think there's a lot of questions about how the course plays, and he is on the short list for me of guys that I back blindly because he can play in a lot of different conditions. If it's brutally hard, I don't worry that I have Reed. If it plays normal, I don't worry that I have Reed. So I like having multiple outs within my guys. Some of these other players, I'm like, okay, I like them in this scenario, but if it's, say, a little colder than we expected, now I have a serious problem. That's a tough thing to get right because we're also don't know how they're going to play. So for me, I'd look to Reed at 92, Bubba at 9K.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to get away from Bubba just based on, A, the stats, which have been immaculate outside of the putting over the past 3 months or so. He's a 2-time winner. It does seem, Rick, like he's really gearing up to make an actual run at winning another green jacket.
I hate to say it, I'm not a Bubba guy. He's been phenomenal. I think he sets up, obviously he sets up for a place he's won at twice, but you're talking about the tee to green game in which he's gained, 11 strokes from tee to green at the US Open, another 11 at the CJ Cup, another 8 at the Zozo Championship. And what I like about him, and this was actually kudos to my colleague, Mark Immelman. I mean, Augusta National, it lends itself well to a defensive putter. That is not like a Ricky Fowler who notoriously rams his ball by the cup 2.5 feet. At Augusta National, that rolls out to 5, 6, 7 feet. A defensive putter like Bubba who tries to drip it over the edge of the cup is certainly valuable. And that shows because he's got 2 green jackets in the closet, which actually I think it's only 1 technically green jacket that he has, but he's got 2 trophies at least. But it is something where he is trending in the right direction right now, Pat, where the game from tee to green is sharp. The greens with their giant undulation at Augusta National, he knows well. His putting style is terrible on the PGA Tour, but lends itself well to Augusta National.
When Patrick Reed won the Masters, Ben, how much money did you win?
A couple 100,000.
When you made those teams, and you talk about this a lot, that you try to correlate skill sets, who are the other types of players on that team? Or is it at the Masters when you're trying to correlate your lineup that kind of goes out the window? Because if it's going to be like cold and wet, like why not just a bunch of British dudes? Like why not Hatton and Fleetwood and those type of guys?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that's a thing. When I talk about correlating skill sets, one of the things, though, that I like to caution people about, I think it's more applicable as you work down. Like if you have a team that's all those guys and you like Bryson, you can still use Bryson. Doesn't need a skill set. He's that good. Same thing with Rahm, in my opinion, guys like that. When you work towards the bottom, you don't want, to me, an extreme bomber who's not a great player with an extreme putter who's not a great player. Like, that's really tough to get them both right. So with weather like this, I have no problem doing that. I know back in 2018 with Reed, I used some guy, Ricky was on that team and some of the other guys that I think can handle it around the green. That's really what I focused on. Augusta's got some weird around the green scrambling type things. And I think it's always a factor, even though it's pretty easy when the wind doesn't blow.
Rick, do you think you're going to be more likely to play the chalkier dudes and the higher upside of the driving and the potential eagle skill set for that DraftKings scoring of Xander and Cantlay? Two guys both playing pretty well right now, although Xander seems like he may have peaked and was riding a hot putter, and now he's coming back down a little bit. It's not going to prevent anyone from using him because people always use him. Yeah. But would you rather take those two guys or maybe take a chance on Hatton or Webb or Reed, guys that people just will not be using?
So I would rather take Hatton, Webb, and Reed. I agree with Ben's sentiments about Patrick Reed. He has so many outs. There's a lot of different ways he can win. If we are trying to guess condition-wise, I mean, Terrell Hatton's won, 3 times in his last 15 starts. He's been phenomenal. He's not the longest hitter on the PGA Tour. There's also another weird aspect to all of this. It could be wet in Augusta, and they have that sub-air system underneath. They could just pump that all night and the golf course won't even know there's rain on it, which makes me a little bit concerned that they just make it play like it's an April Masters no matter what. This place basically has a bubble on it, the way that they're able to really dictate the conditions. And then Webb Simpson, if I knew, if I was going to get a really clean weather report this week, which it doesn't look like I am, he is literally the best player on the PGA Tour from fairway through green. Like, that is not an exaggeration. It's just off the tee, his lack of distance. It really puts him behind the 8 ball. Now, Augusta National is a shorter course. It's not terribly long, and I think he can get himself around there. So to answer your question, Pat, those 3 at the bottom with seemingly lower ownership are much more appealing to me than Xander's hot putter, which is probably going to cool off if it hasn't already. And then, Cantlay, who, has outside of the 3 rounds at Shriners and his win, I don't know, has been all over the place in the restart.
I don't really want to admit this, but I was thinking about locking in Brooks.
Okay, why?
In Houston, and I know I said I wouldn't pay attention to it. You hit on it before. His irons have been really good, basically since the end of the summer. The putting has always been pretty good. The around the green stuff is fine. It's his driving that's been the problem. He has been smacking the shit out of the ball in Houston. That's been the key to his. He's not playing, like, as we record this, he's not playing great by any means, but he is top 10 in the field in driving.
Yeah, I don't know if you want me to date this, but yes, he is gaining strokes off the tee in Houston right now. The iron game is struggling a little bit, but yeah, I mean, if he can put it all together, right? I mean, no one doubts the name value, the upside from Brooks Koepka. I mean, if his name wasn't Brooks Koepka, I don't know what his price would be. It wouldn't be 9,700. We're basically a year removed from the ferocious Brooks Koepka that we know who would dominate major championships. There's certainly signs there, probably not enough signs for me to lock button him.
Lock button's probably too big on this one, but Ben, like, if you're gonna get Brooks, who for whatever reason plays better in majors than he does in every other tournament, it just facts at this point when you look at his results, that if he is comfortable off the tee, and realistically, when you look at his irons from Houston, it was just a really bad round 1. He's actually been in the positives rounds 2 and rounds 3. Obviously, we're releasing this on a Saturday. We don't know what the end result is going to be. I will date it. It's not that big of a deal. Okay. But I just like to see the positive signs off the tee. If that's the case, and I get like a 6% owned Brooks, like, how do I not do that?
So that's the part for me. There's been a ton of majors where I've come in and I haven't liked Brooks. It's all a product of ownership, though. And right now, Rick brings up there are red flags all over the place with Brooks's game. But when you're talking about, you only need, say you play 20 lineups. If you're going to get leverage on 10% of your lineups going to Brooks, I can live with that, because the upside to me is he's wearing a green jacket. The downside is he withdraws or he's hurt and he's completely useless. If I have to allocate 1/3 of my lineups to get over, well, that's a serious question. I don't think I would get there. But if you're telling me Brooks is between 5 and 10% this week, I will even probably get over. And it's not because I think he's going to play well. It's because when I get it right, I really get paid off with a guy like Brooks.
Well, that also harkens back to how you had all that success with Reed when he won, right?
Exactly. Same concept. It's not when that happened, it wasn't like I went into that tournament saying, oh, Patrick Reed's going to win the green jacket. My thought was that if he happens to win it, not a lot of people are going to go there. And the times I get that wrong, yes, they will outweigh the times I get it right. But when I get it right, I will have a real path to do damage.
So he
broke my way there.
Just to kind of add on to that, like Brooks, Morikawa, Hatton, realistically, unless we'll talk about Tiger here in a minute, but those three guys in the $9,000 level, like if you're going to use one, like if you're going to go 10,000, 9,000 to start your team, it does feel like those should be the guys if you're going to use Bryson or DJ or the higher owned players, just because they're going to be single digit ownership. And if they win, which they definitely can win, we know that. I like Webb the least of that bunch, but still, I know that he could feasibly win. I think at Augusta, it's a lot lower for him than in other tournaments, especially being on bent, not being a par 70 short course, where that's kind of where Webb Simpson makes all of his money, gets all of his world rankings. But Brooks, like, I don't know, if we were just to judge out win equity here, Ben, where would Brooks rank if you just said the only result that matters is wins? Don't worry about second, don't worry about third, don't worry about fourth, just winning. Where would Brooks rank in this field in the power rankings of guys expected to win?
Yeah, see, that's where he would gain. He would jump a lot of players. Like, to me, Brooks is more likely to win the event than Xander. I think almost everyone would disagree with that. Now, if you take median results, make the cut, top 20s, all of that would go to steadier players. I think Brooks honestly could be more live to win even than Rory at this point. I think the upside is there. It's just the downside is extreme. And of course, we have to weigh that in.
I don't ever weigh in the downside. Maybe that's why I don't win a lot when it comes to these DraftKings lineups, Rick. But where would you rank Brooks? Because I don't care. Like, if I'm not winning and contending to win these tournaments in my lineup, I don't care if Brooks is 17 over or withdraws at that point. It sucks. I'm going to lose my money. But if he doesn't win, I'm probably going to lose my money anyway.
Yeah, I was with Ben until he said maybe Brooks has more win equity than Rory does.
That's a little much. That was too hot. I got carried away.
He got very excited there. I think he's probably fifth or sixth. I think it's a valid point. I mean, Bryson probably has more win equity. Jon Rahm, Justin Thomas, Dustin Johnson, Rory McIlroy, and then maybe Brooks. Right? I agree, especially for the guys in the 9K range. Brooks's win equity is higher than Webb's, then Patrick Reed's, then Xander's. I mean, you have to kind of weigh that. So yeah, I mean, if it's, I actually kind of like him in outright situations for the same thought process, Pat, which is second place or second to last doesn't really matter. Now, second place in your Millie Maker lineup with Brooks is probably going to be good, but there's so much downside to him that it's concerning. But yes, he absolutely has much more win equity than his peers in his price range.
Fading Xander and Cantlay is just going to go so horrible for me. I can feel it right now.
Yeah. I do that every week, so I can speak from experience. It never goes well, ever.
Let's have the talk. Tiger Woods, the defending champion, is $9,100. We just talked about guys that are coming in super low owned. No one is going to be lower owned, it seems, at least right now, in like the top 30 players in this field than Tiger, Eldrick, Woods. Rick, there isn't a way you can play him, is there?
Not without understanding it's a complete dart throw. I mean, there's zero evidence. I get the fact that Augusta National is the place where course history matters the most, and there's nobody better than Tiger in this field for managing Augusta National. But we are now in basically a full year. The calendar year of 2020 has been very bad for Tiger in a lot of different areas. He has been hemorrhaging strokes off the tee. He's been bleeding strokes on the green. He's been practicing with a longer putter because he's not getting enough practice time in on these greens. It is a lot of holes to plug heading into your title defense at Augusta National. We are a long way removed from the version of Tiger that I know it would be kind of like sacrilegious to say he got lucky and won the 2019 Masters, but like Molinari going in things fell very right for him. He played the back nine beautifully. I mean, it's just the path to him winning this golf tournament is so incredibly narrow that if you are rostering him, you are understanding you are taking a dart throw at most.
Going into last year's Masters, Ben, Tiger's result in the calendar year of 2019. He was 20th at the Farmers, 15th at the Genesis, 10th at WGC Mexico. He had the nice run to the Elite Eight at the match play. He was 30th at the Players Championship, and then he won. But you could see, like, over 8 strokes gained on approach. He was an average of like 5 per event. Even the driving wasn't all that bad, not like it is right now. This year, in the calendar year of 2020, he opened it with a very nice 9th at the Farmers. Since 68th at the Genesis, 40th at Memorial, 37th at the PGA Championship, 58th at the Northern Trust, 50th at the BMW, missed the cut at the US Open, and 72nd at the Zozo. Like, his game just seems broken.
Yeah, I mean, this will be like a viral clip when he wins again. I think he's more likely to miss the cut than win. I really do. Like, the combination right now of his off the tee game and the putting, I've never seen him putt like this. He is lost on the greens. Rick talked about it. Of course, can you blindly back him? I mean, it's Tiger, but it's an opportunity cost. You're sacrificing Bubba, Reed, Hatton types. This is not, oh, well, he's my last man in and he can make a cut at Augusta. Like, he needs to perform for your lineups. It's a big opportunity cost to play Tiger.
What would be the proper price for him this week, do you think, that would actually entice you to play him?
Where's Sandy Lyle?
Oh my God.
Oh man.
I don't know. I mean, if he was like 7,300 or something, and you could look to, like, Tiger obviously can easily make a cut and maybe flirt with the top 20. I just don't know how you pay. If he's north of 85, I really don't know any scenario where I'd get to him.
Rick, what do you think the proper price for Tiger is? I think like 73, 74. I think that there's enough magic beans in Tiger that being at Augusta, almost sort of the case that we spelled out for Brooks, although there's signs of life with Brooks, and just he's a better player at this point of his career, that if you price Tiger in the low 7s, I think I could get on board with that. But 91, it's tough.
Yeah, I was eyeing between. I was putting him below Gary Woodland, who's 7,300, and above Danny Willett, who's 7,000. So somewhere in that range would account for the loss of strokes, basically in similar categories. He has obviously the great course history. I think that's much more fair. But you're right. I mean, you're talking about the lead-in form, Pat, from last year compared to this year. Leading the 7 events leading into the Masters last year, he gained strokes putting in 6 of them. The stroke was great. He's now flipped to the opposite. He's lost strokes putting in 6 of his last 7 measured events. I mean, it's just a completely different version of him right now, and certainly not worth the 90 whatever he is.
Yeah, 9,100. It's a bit stiff. Rather just play Bubba Watson, like Ben pointed out. Let's go to the $8,000 level. At the very top, we got Adam Scott, then Tony Finau, Hideki, Fleetwood, Wolf, Jason Day, Sergio, Jordan Spieth, Ricky Fowler, Paul Casey. This is going to be, I don't even know if this is going to be a hot take or not, Ben, but if we're just going to play good course history at the Masters, I'd rather play Spieth over Tiger. And I don't want to play Spieth.
So would I, which is crazy because Spieth I've been shorting Spieth in every way possible, and it's not working, and I'm not going to play Spieth, but I agree with that. This is an interesting range. I don't think, like, the 9s had a bigger like range. You had some obvious choices and then you had some lower on. This is a little more muddied. I don't see a ton of guys that jump off the page in either direction. Finau is the obvious choice. I think the public will go to him. My first thought is, especially if we're going to bump long irons, I'll probably go to Hideki. I know he hasn't been playing great, but Hideki's that kind of player. I think he can benefit from the wet conditions as well. So that would be my first impression up top. Fleetwood is impossible. I'm not even going to pretend to, unless Augusta moves to Europe. I don't know how you play him because he only is good there anymore. I don't understand.
But these would be the proper type of conditions for Tommy Fleetwood, though, wouldn't they?
They would, but how he goes to Europe and his irons are fixed. And then I say, great, his irons are fixed. And then he comes back over and he is just completely broken on the approach game. We've seen it time and time again this year. I want to be interested, but I don't know how you overcome that. If
we just look at pure iron strokes gained past 24 rounds from the last 3 months, Rick, overall in this field, Finau is 7th in the field, Wolf is 6th in the field, and no one else is inside the top 10. Decky is the next closest at 13th. Everyone else is like kind of bad with their irons in this region.
I think there's a couple of obvious plays. You know, Ben mentioned Tony Finau. I think he's going to be incredibly popular. I would like to inject Jason Day into this conversation. Now he's playing well in Houston right now. I actually hope he doesn't win this because, you know, his results over the past couple of months, they certainly look a lot worse on paper than they are. I mean, he withdrew from the CJ Cup on Sunday when he was in the top 10. The tee to green game has looked sharp at times. And if we want to talk about course history, here's a guy who has 4 top 10 finishes in his last 9 trips to Augusta. I memean, I'm not in the same way. I'm not a big Bubba guy, and I can find a path to him this week. I'm not a huge Jason Day guy, but I can certainly find a path to him as well.
You just to look at the odds and track those with Jason Day. The Houston tournament isn't even over as we speak right now. He's like currently inside the top 5. He's contending at least as we're speaking. Yeah. And his odds have dropped from 60-1 to 33-1. Jason Day could be lining up, even if he comes top 3 in Houston, to be the guy everyone goes to besides Tony Finau in this range.
Let's hope that he punts it on Sunday. I mean, I think he's he's so crazy, right? I mean, he can withdraw, he can look great. There was the four top 10s in a row at the end of last season where he was absolutely dynamite. Were followed up by like 4 tournaments where he looked brutal, right? I think he's probably one of the more volatile options. I would be not at all surprised if he won the Masters, and not at all surprised if he was like the one guy a year who missed the cut, right? It was Justin Rose last year. Sergio imploded at one point. I think we got a Paul Casey miscut at one point. Like there's always like 1 or 2 big names that fail to make the weekend. If you told me one of them was Jason Day, I'd be like, yeah, that sounds exactly right.
Adam Scott's having a rough go in the 3rd round, losing over 4 strokes off the tee, and he's not even completed his round yet. That seems to be a big outlier because the approach was looking really good, and so was the driving for Adam Scott. Then they just popped in my mind. The last time that I remember rain at Augusta is when Adam Scott won in the rain.
Yeah, that was I don't have it in front of me. That was like what 20 it was a while ago, 6, 7, 8 years ago, I think. Listen, Adam Scott is one of those guys. It's been really hard for me to gauge him because he had a different strategy than everybody else. He returned in August for the major cold. Like he did not, and he was fine, but at the same time, it wasn't fantastic. The results have really not jumped off the page in any way. We've kind of seen that continue into Houston. So I think if I'm going to pivot off Finau, I would go down, like I said, to Decky. Jason Day is very interesting, but as Rick talked about, to me, he's one of the most important people with ownership. If ownership masses around him, he becomes such an interesting fade because he truly has equity where he's hurt, and you can take out 20% of the field just like that. So although I like him in theory, I also want to keep an eye on how popular he's going to be.
Finau, like we mentioned, is a good play. It's a good price for Finau. Obviously, he can play the Masters very well, even on a broken ankle. It doesn't seem to be a problem for him. So I like Tony Finau a lot. I do worry about that he's probably going to be the highest owned player in the Millionaire Maker, just with the way that the pricing ended up shaking out. Plus, he's playing all right in Houston as well, coming off of COVID at 8-8. I'll probably use a little bit of Finau, probably try to match the field. I'll probably end up playing 10 to 20 lineups. But I do like Adam Scott as the pivot here, and I'm definitely going to be using Matthew Wolff. I know that the driving has been abysmal the past 2 starts, which I don't quite understand, Rick. Like, how did this happen? How do you go from being the best guy with your driver on tour to like literally the worst?
He's 21 years old, right? I mean, it's just there are aspects of these guys' games that we have to remember. They are very young. They are still trying to figure everything out, and consistency usually comes with experience. So that's what's going on with Matthew Wolff. He has one of the best weapons, the driver, to try to pick apart Augusta National. And I know there's a lot of hesitation about debutantes, right? Guys making their first start. We know Fuzzy Zeller was the last guy to win the Masters in his first go at it. But you have to remember, I mean, he's 80. What? 400, 500, $8,500. He doesn't have to win, right? He makes enough birdies. He's going to have a bunch of cracks at eagles. You know, you talk about first timers trying to contend. I mean, top 10s have been possible. Top 15s have been possible, especially with DraftKings scoring, not necessarily just looking at what the leaderboard is going to wrap up with. So yeah, Wolf's going to have a couple of weeks. He's going to have time to fix that driver before he gets to Augusta, Georgia on Thursday and has to tee it up. But I'm certainly with you, Pat. I don't know what it is. I think it's just a lot of volatility for an inexperienced player, but he's got the skill set to light this place on fire.
Yeah, I'm willing to embrace it. And where the driving has been so bad in his last 2 starts, I think that gets people like, I think everyone who was planning on using Matthew Wolff will now look at Jason Day, who's playing well, and shift all of those shares onto Jason Day. Ben, he's going to end up being popular, which means full fade.
I'm more on that wavelength as well. Wolff is someone I don't really think too much about. He's got extreme upside. I worry because, as Rick talked about, you're gonna get some things where we're just like, how is this guy in the range with these experienced golfers when he plays like this? He doesn't belong, but he does. It's just very volatile. So I'll play some of that. I think to me, Sergio is the most interesting play. He's had so many bad putting performances. Then he held it together and he won. Off the tee is always going to be good with him. He had the blow up after the Masters win. He's kind of just sitting there at 83. I don't think he'll be too popular. I'm not saying I'm going to jam him, but I'll look to him as a pivot off day, similar to Decky off a pivot of Finau.
Well, this is the range that I can't figure out what to do. Like, I don't have any of these guys starred. I don't know if I want to use any of them. You got Sergio, Spieth, Ricky, and Paul Casey in the bottom of the $8,000 area. Rick, is there any one of those four players you actually like this week?
No. I mean, I have a very difficult time finding a reason to get to anybody in the $8,000 range. I mentioned it earlier. We interviewed Ricky Fowler like 2 days ago, and he didn't even really sound all that confident, and where the swing was at and where the game has been. He's like, yeah, I've had a couple of good rounds this year. I'm like, dude, like, come on, like, pump yourself up. You're like a couple of days away from Augusta National. Like, let's go. Like, I think he's going to have a lot of fun. I think that he's going to be great, but I will probably avoid the bottom of this $8,000 range almost the entirety of it. Yeah.
Sergio, Ben, is the only one that kind of intrigues me. I guess Casey does too, because he's played the Masters pretty well. We saw him contend at the PGA Championship. That wasn't too long ago. Brit, if you play the Brit narrative in the soggy conditions, maybe that can go a long way. It's hard to fit these guys in too with the way that we've been talking about building lineups.
It is. I mean, obviously they're going to be, if you double jam, they're going to be your third man in. Balance is a little easier, but it's tough. I mean, Ricky is really struggling. Spieth is obviously has his own issues. Paul Casey's, I don't know. He's really tough to. I'm still, Rick, if you ever interview him, ask him what he did on that water hazard at Memorial where he went over it and then he chipped back into the drink. It's always something with him. To me, what I really pull from this is Sergio does one thing that I'm actually confident that he will do. He drives the ball well. I think he will. These other guys, I can't be confident in Ricky's putting anymore. And Paul Casey's irons, yes, they're good, but it's not nearly as consistent as I would like.
Yeah, so man, can't believe I like Sergio the best of these guys. We'll see if he ends up making.
World.
We'll end up see if he makes the final cut. I'll talk about that on Wednesday's show in terms of DraftKings lineups. 7K range, we can just kind of pick apart what's going on here. Joaquin Niemann, obviously at $7,400, has withdrawn. There's another breaking news withdraw from the Masters, guys. Angel Cabrera has a wrist injury. He is also not going to play this year. But it gets really tricky in the 7Ks because no one's really playing all that great. Maybe Lowry will end up winning and enhance my pocketbook at Houston, and then he'll end up being super popular. But the name that I mentioned off the hop when we talked about that distance, someone who's been playing like sneakily pretty good recently, $7,300. Cam Smith, I kind of like him.
Yeah, it is something, right? He's got a fourth place at the Zozo, 11th at the CJ Cup. I mean, you could almost argue very, very similar fields to what you're going to get in Augusta. Short field, obviously, it's not a guaranteed cut, but a lot of guys that at the bottom of it aren't necessarily going to contend. Also, wasn't it Cam Smith who he won in Sony this year, right? I'm thinking of that is correct, right? And it was wet, it was nasty on the weekend. It was not Honolulu like we remember it to be. So this might play into his hands a bit this week. So $7,300 for Cam Smith is very interesting, Pat. I think you hit one there. 51st
at the Masters a year ago in 2019. Other than that, 5th the year before. That was the Tony. I believe that was the Tony Finau broken ankle year. I can't quite remember at this point. I think it was. He was 5th that year too, so he was out there in close to the final group come Sunday. So I think $7,300 is a very generous price, and mainly because I don't like anyone else here. Like, the ownership is gravitating towards one player, Ben, and it's Matthew Fitzpatrick. Pass.
Yeah, Fitzy. I mean, I think people, especially if it looks like it's going to be cold and wet, like he's the poster boy for that. Long irons, good putter, but seems to do most of his damage on Bermuda. He just in June and July, he was riding as hot a putter as any player will have. It was consistently 5+ strokes. Gained, obviously that regressed, and the results, he's had some miscuts, certainly in the bigger events. Justin Rose to me is always interesting. Obviously last year, that was a really bad miscut at Augusta. His game is all over the place. You've got Sunjay right there as well. There are names. It's just, this is where we start to, you're not going to find guys who are playing consistently well and have great pedigree. If you did, they would be 9,000. That's why we find guys sub 8K. They have either red flags or they're just not as polished a player.
If we go by the stats, Rick, Jason Kokrak might be the best value in this tournament, although he's never played the Masters before.
Yeah, we go back to the first timer thing, but obviously playing well at the moment. We talked about it earlier where not only does he hit it far, but he carries it. His putter has been great in this early 2021 season. He doesn't have as many rounds as everybody else, but he's contended a lot. 6th place at the BMW Championship. He had a top 20 at the US Open. He won the CJ Cup, and just when I thought all of that was going to go away, I mean, he finished in the top 20 at the Zozo the next week. It's hard to follow up wins, especially for a guy who doesn't win often like Jason Kokrak. So yeah, we haven't seen him in a couple of weeks. People probably forgetting how well he played. He's an even $7,000. He moves the needle. Can we spend a minute on Scotty Scheffler? Because he is $7,800. He was one of the hottest players before he tested positive for COVID, missed the US Open. Looked like he was rounding into form with a 17th place finish last week at the Zozo, and he's kind of been brutal in Houston.
He's been brutal in Houston, and after he was almost the first round leader, it was like, hey, what the hell is going on here? Because I went and looked at the numbers, like, oh, this is all putting based. That's not good. He basically took the Bryson approach. He was gaining a bunch off the tee and a bunch putting. That works for Bryson, and that's basically about it. And then he fell apart the next 2 rounds. So I don't know what to do with him. He's also a first-timer, a debutant at Augusta National. I think I'd rather just go with Rose, as sad as that sounds, man.
Yeah, it sounds sad. I'm not going to lie, but I'm with you. Usti's also there. Let's not forget about Ust, who can come from the clouds.
I have him projected at the moment to be the highest owned guy of the $7,000 range. And I'm looking back, I'm scanning Fantasy National for like the course history. In the past 5 years, Louis has made the cut every time, but he's never finished better than 12th.
I mean, it's Louis. You don't want to play. I might say some chalk, but even if he's remotely popular, the upside is always capped. You don't know what you're going to get. If it looks like it's going to play, I think the harder, the better for him. Weird conditions favor him. I have one guy in the 7s, though, that I think Cam Smith I'm on board with for sure. I have one. I don't want to call him a dark horse. I think that Kevin Kisner with these conditions could be in a pretty good spot. Good putter, good irons. If he can hold it together off the tee, obviously that's the concern. But I think he's primed for a good finish at 7,100.
I just worry that he doesn't hit it far enough.
Yeah.
And maybe if I'm going to go down in this range, I'd kind of rather go out swinging with the Bombers, Rick.
I agree. Kisner's interesting. I do think he has a path to success. I think it's a very specific one, right? He's got to hold it together. Ben's absolutely right. Off the tee, he's got to hit his long irons really well, and he's got to gain 4 or 5 strokes on the field putting. And that's something we've seen him do before. This is his region, right? He's from Aiken, South Carolina. He went to the University of Georgia. He knows this area. I just think it's a very specific path to success. I would rather also, Pat, probably consider some of the Bombers, some of the other names around him.
Well, the name that kind of sticks out to me is Shane Lowry. I know that the Masters has never really been his jam. He's missed the cut 3 out of 4 starts, came 39th and another. But he's someone who gains off the tee. He can gain with his irons. He's a major champion since we last saw him at Augusta. The results have been pretty good recently. Like, he keeps making cuts. He played really well over in Europe. I believe when you combine those two together, he has like 3 top 20s and 5 starts. I feel like he should be pretty good here. And the around the green game is very, very good. That's not going to hurt him.
I mean, Lowry, he's interesting. I get a little worried about him. Not that Augusta, I'm not saying this is going to be where it's 25 under. It's just some of the tracks that he excels at, I don't think really correlate that well with what we may see. So with a range that you talked about, Woodland being hurt, Cam Smith is going to be somewhat popular relative to the range. There's not a lot to like, and I get where Lowry fits. This is where, just to tie it in, Pat, I think this is where you talk about skill sets. Like, you guys are 100%. I wouldn't use Kevin Kisner with Wolf and Bryson and Champ and Kokrak. Like, I don't see that. But if you want to build a different type of team, Lowry, Kisner types, they fit with certain specific guys.
2 more guys. Well, you mentioned Champ, who I think profiles really well, but I actually like him at shorter courses than longer courses. Historically, that's where his best results have come. So might be a fade on old Cam Champ. But Rick, looking at him right now, he's an old man. He did not play well in Houston in the first round, played really well in the second round, and had some nice European results. He's a Masters guy. Can we go to Lee Westwood?
Yeah, I was hoping you were going to go there. Yeah, I think it's fine, right? I mean, not only so first of all, he's been dynamite at Augusta, right? I mean, I can pull up his course history here, but he's been great. He missed the cut in Houston, but if you look at his worldwide results, he's got like 10 top 30s in a row worldwide. One of them was at the U.S. Open. He played really well. Here's his run of golf at the Masters since 2010 to most recent: second, 11th, third, 8th, 7th, 46th, 2nd, and 18th. That is phenomenal stuff. If you want experience, if you want a guy who outside of this week in Houston has been making cuts all over the world, even here at the U.S. Open, yes, I think that Lee Westwood is a fairly good option in the low 7K range.
I think if he had played well in Houston, he would have ended up being pretty popular. But people are going to look at it's almost like Sergio. People are going to look at the score and be like, nah. And then guys like Hideki and guys like Jason Day are all going to get this buzz because they played well. Like Dustin is one thing. Like Dustin's Dustin. He's going to be popular either way. He should play well. He's the number 1 ranked player in the world, which is kind of tricky considering he's the 5th highest priced player in the field this week, which might actually make him, like, when you think about like optimal and best value, like points per dollar salary wise, it could be Dustin Johnson. But now people are going to be off Lee Westwood. I think that's a time where I can buy here a little bit. Another guy who has an excellent Masters run, historically, if you look like past 30 years or so, Ben, what are you doing with Phil, who's going to be hitting bombs?
Yeah, that's right. Nothing. I'm not doing anything of consequence with Phil. I will let other people. He's going to be gearing up for the match with Charles Barkley. That's what he has to look forward to. Not for me. There's too many other guys.
Rick, Phil has 2 wins in his past 3 starts.
Good way to frame that.
Technically true, which is a good way to be correct, but unfortunately, much different on the Champions Tour than it is here on the PGA Tour. I mean, Phil's like, what's that Vegas Vacation movie when they go to Hoover Dam and they're trying to plug all the leaks all over the place? You put a piece of gum in there, another one pops. It's just he's playing whack-a-mole. Everything is wrong with Phil's game right now. The magic putter can't bail him out. He is just hemorrhaging strokes off the tee. He's gonna. I mean, I tip my cap to him for pulling out a 47.5-inch driver and just letting it bomb at Augusta like he's telling us it is, because like he's going to spray it anyway. You might as well hit it as far as possible and see if you can catch lightning in a bottle for 4 days. But Phil is not good right now.
The last 2, I guess we should talk about, guys that have played really well at Augusta over the years, Rick, would be Kuchar and Poulter. I guess they would fit the builds of like, if you're going to use Hatton and Fleetwood, like throw them in.
I guess so. I mean, listen, I'm a bit more optimistic on Poulter. I think that he can kind of, I just mentioned, catch lightning in a bottle. I think he can fire it up in big time tournaments like this. Kuchar used to be a free space in these Millie Makers and major championships. When they'd lower his pricing down, he'd be like the first guy in. You'd always find a backdoor top 10 out of him. I feel like we're just a long way removed from that. I mean, he hasn't been playing well. He's been playing a bit, right? I mean, we saw him play Zozo, CJ Cup, 54th, 52nd. He made the cut at Shriners, but wasn't great. He missed the cut at the U.S. Open. I just feel like the time has passed for Kuchar, and sometimes not even course history can save you.
And Ben, these guys are going to get ownership because they are familiar names in the lower 7s.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Kuchar was the stability. You could go to him and confidently know he's not going to tank your lineup. You can't say that anymore. If he loses that, he loses what I think is his only like redeeming quality on the DFS side. So I can't really go there because the stability is not there anymore.
6K right now, and Rick, this shouldn't shock you. Your guy Lanto is sub 7,000. And when I look at the ownership, he projects to be the highest guy in the 6,000. Number 2, Munoz, who actually do have a future on the most hilarious future bet of all time, where they mispriced him and they didn't cancel it. So 2,500 to 1. Let's go Munoz for the win this week as a debutant. Probably not going to happen, but DraftKings wise, those are the 2 guys that people are going to. It's tricky with first timers though, isn't it? In the 6K range?
It certainly is, but I mean, the alternative is, I mean, CT Pan, go get a past champion. Go. I mean, I just think that the talent level, right? So we're now in the range where pricing is so soft, and we have guys like Lanto, like Sebastian Munoz, who are sneaky playing well. I mean, their skill set is just better than a lot of their peers. I don't necessarily care if they've played Augusta National or not. We're at that point of the pricing range. What Lanto brings is a couple of things, right? I mean, he's a great iron player. He can gain you 3, 4, 5 strokes on approach over the course of the week, and his putter can get hot. Sometimes he relies on it a bit more than I would like, but a strong iron game paired with an ability to get hot on the greens is a great combination to do what he tends to do, which is be undervalued, sneak up, grab yourself a top 10, get 10 times value, and take all those lineups towards the top of the leaderboard. I mean, he just, week in, week out, seems to pay for himself.
I'm trying really hard because I actually like those two guys, Ben, but I don't like them at chalk ownership. The problem is when I look at the 6K range, there's no one who sticks out as like, oh, that guy's really good. The only one stats-wise who kind of correlates with all of the other players we've been talking about is actually Matt Wallace.
Yeah, Matt Wallace he was on such a run and then he cooled off, but he's going back to Europe. He's had some results and we know that he can get it done in some strong fields. Now he was leaning on a putter pretty heavily. I did look to him, to me, in the same vein kind of as Lee Westwood is Wiesberger, just does his thing. I think he can find the weekend as he usually does. And we're starting to get to the range, as Rick kind of talked about. You find the weekend, you outscore your placement points a little. It can't be that bad, sub 7. These guys aren't asked to really carry the load for your team. They just need to not derail everything.
Well, what's the cutoff point for you, salary-wise here? Like there are, I want to say... And I hate to throw CT Pan, the Panimal, or Andrew Landry, or Nasty Nate Lashley, or Putnam, or Sung Kang, or Papashugo Imihara into this mix, but like I'm not playing any of these guys. Like I'm trying to find the lowest guy I could feasibly see myself playing is probably Max Homa, and I probably don't want to play him, but he's 6,400.
Yeah, I'm with you. There is in some alternative universe, I guess I could play CH3 or Hadwin, but there's almost nothing that could happen where I would dip lower than that.
Where is it for you, Rick? Because like Lanto at 66 does appear to be the lowest price guy I really want to go to, but I'd probably pivot off of him and get to like Corey Connors at 66.
I was just going to say Corey Connor. So the answer to that question for me is 6,600. I'm probably not going any lower than that. You start to get into the past champs and guys I really don't trust. But yeah, if you don't want Lanto, Corey Connors is rounding the corner. I mean, he was in a really bad place in the restart. He was not looking like himself. He's starting to figure that out a little bit. Finished 17th at the Sanderson Farms, hit the ball beautifully. Finished 8th at the Zozo. He's playing well in Houston right now. So we'll see how that goes for the rest of the week. But Corey Connors is looking to try to get back on brand. And remember what Corey Connors' brand is be good off the tee, be good on approach, and the closer you get to the hole, just be terrible. But if he can, roll the rock field average for a round or two, he might find a way to compete. And Ben's absolutely right. Doesn't need to win the golf tournament. He's $6,600. He needs to finish like, I don't know, a T12 would be, sign me up for that all day long. I'll lock him in.
The stats are telling me that Lucas Glover is actually the best of these guys in this range.
Check the model.
Readjust everything. It's also telling me that Siwoo Kim Ben is a top 15 play this week.
Well, yeah, that now you might have a couple tweaks to make. Listen, I think it's all about what you have to define your lineups when you get down here. If you look and you say, all right, I love my stability. These guys are going to really, median outcomes. I need some upside. I think Siwoo makes a lot of sense because we know what he can do. If you say, I have some crazy guys, I pivoted off of Finau, I pivoted off the chalk, I love my upside. Well, you don't want to take another wild man down here. Go with someone's stability that you think, I'll take a T30 even. I'll take a T35 because I know that if I hit a winner like Reed, only a couple people are going to have a guy like that. So it doesn't really matter. You just want 6 of 6. So it's about balancing your lineups and knowing what you need when you get down to the cheapies.
Molinari's playing okay in Houston.
No, he's actually just putting like a psycho, which is not. I'm not going to talk about Molinari. Rick, you can handle him.
Well, as you just said, he's putting crazily and he sucks tee to green, which is the opposite of what he normally is. So he's basically Rick turned into Molinari. He's the opposite of what he used to be.
Oh, good. Okay, I like that. Yeah. So to add numbers to this, through basically 2.5 rounds of the Houston Open, he's gaining like 7 strokes in the short game, and basically tour average in the rest of it. Yeah, I mean, Molinari going back to the scene of the crime. I can't wait for him to step up to number 12 on Thursday and see if I could get a little heart rate monitor on that. I'd love to see it. But no, Molinari will not be touching or even sniffing any of my lineups.
So who are our favorite, if we had to pick 2 guys from down here that are your favorite plays? I think I'm going to go with Matt Wallace and Corey Connors or EVR maybe?
It'd be EVR and Wiesberger for me.
I think I like Corey Connors and I mean, I'm a sucker. Lanto. I will say this: Siwoo Kim, the short game stuff is super handy around Augusta National, right? You're seeing that at Houston. You're seeing guys bleed strokes around the green, really tough, shaved off areas. Siwoo and his short game is kind of handy around here.
And he's been really good off the tee as well. I think he hits it a lot longer than people think. Here's the problem with Corey Connors and Siwoo when we get down to it, and Connors especially if he has a good result in Houston. That there is a guy in this range. You could just, I mean, you could combine Siwoo Kim and Corey Connors together and get the guy that no one is using, and hopefully that the driver actually shows up. Instead of taking, Canadian Corey Connors, you can take Korean Corey Connors and take Ben An.
I'm a sucker for Ben. I gotta this doesn't even sound all that bad to me. Like okay, you really don't have to twist my arm on him. He's very on brand, right? We talk about that with a lot of guys. Sergio stays on brand. Ben An stays on brand. He's gonna putt like a psychopath and try to get lucky for 4 days.
He lost from the US Open through the CJ Cup. It was 4 events. He lost 21 strokes putting.
That's good, right?
That's even Luke List and Griot are like, wow, that's not good. That's really tough. The weird thing about Ben An, this is the only thing I can say that I like. Normally, when you're a horrible putter, you're a terrible chipper and around the green player. He's a world-class around the green player. So he can work out of trouble. I just don't know if he can finish off the scrambles with the putt.
Well, I guess if it's going to be wet, maybe it's not as firm as it normally is. I can talk myself into Ben An and watch him throw him I can definitely throw him in my to make the cut parlays and watch him 8 putt a hole like Ernie Els and, destroy my week on a Thursday. It'll be fun.
Sounds fun to me.
All right. I think that'll do it on the Pat Mayo Experience DraftKings Masters 2020 preview. Playing the best tournament on DraftKings, the Pat Mayo Experience Listeners League. Link is in the description of the video and podcast. Remember to get your membership at fantasynational.com right now. All the customizable stats you could ever want. Probably too many, to tell you the truth. There's a lot to digest in there. But the tools, the ownership projections, the simulator, the lineup generator, it's all there for you on any style of membership. Go to fantasynational.com/Mayo to get yourself a discount. Ben, what do you got coming out this week?
Oh, we're going to be busy over at awesemo.com. Obviously, a ton of articles, videos every day of the week leading up, projections, the ownership, which we've talked so much about. Alex does such a great job of projecting that, our leverage tools, talk about our exposures. So if you want to come in, even just for a week, we have weekly passes. Now would be the time to do it. I can't wait to get this Masters underway.
Rick, you've officially taken my title as hardest working man in the golf space. So Golf Digest, CBS, Rick Run Good. You got anything more going on?
No, I think that's about everything. Yeah. rickrungood.com for golf data and visualizations. Obviously with CBS having the broadcasting rights, they go all in on weeks like this. It's a Super Bowl. So, there will be podcast First Cut Pod, after every single day of the week. And then I'll be live on CBS Sports HQ, basically hour by hour doing live look-ins and showing shots and talking about it for the Masters. So it should be pretty wild.
Well, let's give one more round. Let's pick a winner of the Masters before we get out of here. Ben, I'm picking Bryson.
I'll take Rahm.
All right, Bryson, let's do it.
Yeah, this is not going to turn out well when Dustin Johnson finally wins.
Rory's going to win. I picked him 10 years in a row, and I'm just going to...
The betting show will be out on Monday with Jeff Feinberg. I will be hosting a live chat Wednesday, 12 p.m. Eastern Time on Mayo Media Network YouTube channel. Please subscribe. Help us out over at Mayo Media Network. Get those subs up, and please rate and review the audio podcast if you're listening right now. Anything that you can share, like the episode, anything like that really does go a long way in rigging the algorithm so more people actually find the show. So please help us out over here, okay? Good luck at the Masters. We got more content coming for you. I'll see you next time.
That Mayo experience! Experience!